volunteers, but a whole lot of team appearances here, so welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. So the next order, moving on to next order of business would be the minutes. So you received the minutes from the June Instruction Committee meeting, and like you, I remembered every single word on it. I didn't find anything wrong, so I moved to pass the minutes from the June Instruction Committee. Over second. Second, all in favor? Sorry, Iman, you weren't at that meeting, so you were
I'll abstain.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed. Okay, let's get on with this. So we've got a whole lot of people here to talk about our pathways and STEM program. And as I was reviewing all the materials, and thought that this is a great example of how we can apply our most recent discussion around the expansion process that we just staging process that we just called it is a real good example of how we can apply those that discussion and what we put together that to this program, which we invested some resources in and got 1 year into, and have some results to discuss. So I know that Cindy and Lisa are going to take the lead on this, and so and then everyone else can. I got all your names of people because I asked for them, so I got all your names.
It's a lot.
But when you come up, grab that recorder and put it near to you, and if you would give your name, so that we know who we're talking to and where you're from. And just remember that this is not a microphone, it's a recorder. So when you're speaking, speak loud enough so that everybody in the room can hear you, especially old guy at the end here. So, Jen, you want to get things on, get things rolling?
Yep, let's do it. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see this crowd here tonight. I want to welcome Cindy, Alex, who else is coming up here? Bo and Lisa, sorry. We practiced on everything. It's great to have our core team here, and then obviously we'll be hearing from the larger team a little bit later tonight. We're really excited to present to the board. I know Gloria will be here in a couple minutes. I'm sorry that James and Nikki are out of town. We'll make sure to catch them up because I know they have great interest in this work and this particular topic. We're here to share with you not just the results, but the lessons learned from our first year of Pathways implementation. As you know, this effort was designed really not to be incremental, but to be transformational. We want to transform the high school experience so that more students are graduating, but not just graduating ready for college, career, and community in all the senses of that word that we've discussed in the past. This is not about change around the margins. It's really about a new way of engaging high schoolers in meaningful work that increases the potential that students are graduating ready for life after high school, and especially for students who have been positioned furthest away from that goal in the past. I just cannot emphasize enough the power and potential of the work that everyone in this room and others are leading. I want to thank all the school-based staff members who are in the room. I very much appreciate you. I want to thank the partners who are in the room, and we have several here today. I want to thank the central office folk who've been working on this effort. I am convinced that the work that we have scoped out in our new strategic framework that is the most transformational is the work that we're doing that kind of pushes beyond the boundaries of the classroom, that forces us to work in deep partnership with the community that we serve. And I think this is a great example of that work. In tonight's meeting, you're going to hear from Cindy about the Pathways report from year one and our lessons learned. Bo is here to answer any technical questions related to that report. We're going to pause at the end of that for questions. Then you're going to hear from each of our high school teams. You know, in our new strategic framework, one of the tenets is about empowering school communities. So we want our schools themselves at the table talking about what they've learned and where they want to go as it's related to pathways. So you'll get a chance to hear from each of those 4 high school teams. You'll get a chance to ask each of those teams questions about their experience. Then we'll wrap it up with next steps. Ultimately, I think board members know this, but we're seeking your approval later this month to take the next step as it relates to pathways expansion, and you'll hear exactly what that ask is a little bit later tonight. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Cindy, our fearless leader, and I'll chime in a little bit later.
So good evening. I'm really excited to be here. More importantly, I'm excited for you to hear from our schools who have been really on the ground implementing personalized pathways for the last year. So it's going to be a great night. And I also just want to thank Jen Wagner and her team who have been like directly involved as the pathways team for all of their hard work. So just a Oops, yep, there we go. So just a reminder, our personalized pathways is really grounded around these 5 tenets: our academic and career planning, the program of study, the courses that students take, our personalized student supports, experiential learning opportunities, and small learning communities. Throughout the night when our schools come up here, you're going to hear more deeply about some of these tenets and how it is actually playing out in the school. So I'm looking forward to that. Our outcomes for the night are to hear about and provide a little bit of an overview to the Year 1 implementation report that you all received. We'll share a couple highlights from the report. Most importantly, to hear the lessons learned from each one of our high schools and what they're considering for next steps. And then to talk about the validation of expanding pathways for our schools. A reminder, Jen already brought this up, but we are deeply working on the graduate vision as well, and in each of our pathways kind of units of studies and work that they're doing at the school, they think about each one of these areas in terms of the graduate vision and are planning for how students will meet these, as well as just the mastery of content. Our guiding principles that we use whenever we're thinking about our pathways now or future pathway, which are really important. And really important for us to talk about tonight is this idea of pathways and scaling and how these two things are merging together. So I'm going to turn it back to Jen so she can have this conversation.
Dean already referenced this, but we just want to highlight that we just codified our guidance around decisions related to scaling promising practices in our school district. This is kind of our first decision out of the gate where we're going to be applying some of that guidance. As you've seen in the deck, we view pathways as being at the validating stage. We are well into this work, a full year of planning for the first cohort, 1 year in with the first cohort, now with the second cohort at each of our high schools. And our job is to test whether or not it should be stopped because it has failed, kind of held steady with adjustments, or expanded, right, appropriately to the next logical step. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We believe, and I think you can see that on the slide, that not all schools need to make the same decision. We think that is an important part of this decision making. Schools are in different places. And I think my last reminder on this is, as a board and as a larger leadership team, we're trying to learn how to better recognize emergent learning, right? It's not just about the results. The results are really important. What we're learning from those results are equally important. So when you're listening tonight, I hope that you'll be listening for both the results, what they look like, and the lessons that we've learned and what lessons we want to apply in the next stage. That's what it means, I think, to be a learning organization, and that's what we're striving to do. So I'll pass it back to Cindy.
Thanks. So a reminder that the work of Personalized Pathways is not just work of MMSD. We have 8 very committed anchor partners. You see them all represented up here. Many of them are in the audience, so I can't thank them enough for being here tonight. But I think just as importantly is they provide human resources and financial resources to support our students with experiential learning opportunities during the day and also out of the school day. So this is a great example of a community-wide effort that we are not doing this by ourselves. And I thought it was important tonight to highlight some of those efforts that have been happening for our students. Our anchor partners overall have helped us with our expos that we have for our students. We did our first ever College for All event, and we had CBOs there as well as our anchor partners help pull it together. And then we have a variety of industry council structures to support our pathways. And then we have very specific opportunities that each organization has held for our students, from college tours to visiting certain labs to having hands-on opportunities. I'm not going to read through all of them, but a variety of opportunities that each of our schools has been able to experience. What I wanted to do was share a little more of the pictures and actually see in action some of these events. So these are our students, and they're actually at the Sim Lab over at Madison College, and they had this as one of their experiences. We also have students from UW, they went to UW-Madison and they did the DOC program, which is Doc's Auto Care, and they were actually able to engage and touch brain and liver specimens. So they had hands-on experiences and dug into things that I would not want to do, but they had a wonderful time doing it. Over at Edgewood, they held a multicultural nursing seminar, and so our students were able to go there and experience what it would be like to be a nurse and have a hands-on experience there as well. And UW Health, this was an opportunity for our Pathways staff, not for our students, where they were able to engage in a mini Hope Lab and actually learn about the health occupations careers out there, and the staff did their own learning. So just a few examples of where we have a whole set of community partners that are part of this work and helping to provide these experiences for our students and also for our staff. I want to take a few minutes now to highlight a few areas of our Year 1 evaluation report. As a reminder, you received the report that has a full set of data, both qualitative and quantitative data. We won't go into all of that data now. I think some more of that will come out when you hear from the schools. But I wanted to emphasize this idea of our Goal 3 in our new strategic framework that focuses on excelling for our African American students. And at the high school level, one of those metrics is 9th grade on track. And I think Pathways is a great example of where we're seeing progress for African American students specifically, and the performance of our students. Bo, anything else you want to say about that before I go on?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple more comments here. So our team in the Research and Program Evaluation Office did complete this Year 1 report focusing on some really early outcomes that we're seeing from Personalized Pathways. I'll note that we did receive a lot of questions from board members and community members over the last few days. We've had an opportunity to respond to a lot of those this afternoon to board members as well, and we'll keep looking at those as we move forward. But we were able to provide some additional disaggregated school level data that's now available, as well as some extra information on class sizes. So what you're going to see in these next few slides here, as well as throughout the report, is that we used a technique called propensity score matching. What we wanted to do was compare Pathways students against a group of their peers that was more similar than just looking at everybody else who didn't participate in Pathways. So what we did was match students across a set of demographic and engagement variables from middle school, so that we could make comparisons that are, if not apples to apples, at least a little bit closer. So in these slides, what you're going to see are results for Pathways students, as well as their matched comparison group. And then you're going to see some extra contextual information for all other students as well. So we're going to highlight just a few outcome measures here, but there's a lot more that you can look at in the report.
So what gap do we need to be statistically significant given their low numbers?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So when we are talking about small samples here, you know, it's a it's a pretty high threshold for actually finding statistical significance. So I think a lot of the differences you're looking at here as you're breaking out by racial ethnic group are probably not necessarily going to show as being statistically significant just because the student populations we're looking at are relatively small. So that's one of the reasons that we didn't really focus on statistical significance calculations within the report. Rather just kind of wanted to look at the numbers, you know, on their face and focus on kind of the practical significance and how they seem to resonate.
Is there a number, though, that we should have in our mind if it's a gap of 10%? That's probably...
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it's whatever seems practically right as you're looking. The gap itself would kind of depend on, you know, the measure we're looking at. So, yeah.
Okay, so as Bo just oriented you to the slide, we have a couple groups that we're looking at. We have our pathway students, both all students, and then specific for our African American student group. We have our matched comparison group. We have this kind of overall group that didn't really have a match of pathways, and then all other students at the 9th grade level. And what you'll notice in this slide in particular for 9th grade on track, which is our set of metrics that we look at for our students in 9th grade, is that overall pathway students had slightly more likely to end 9th grade on track than their peers, but that there was a difference for our African American students that was pretty pronounced. From 71% to 56% for their matched group and 33% for all other students.
Mary? Yeah.
Thank you. How many students, and I didn't see whether that was in, I didn't find it in the report as to how many African American students are in this Pathways number?
About 80.
Okay, thank you.
I'll tell you what, if you have something that can't wait, flag me down and it'll get in. Otherwise, there's breaks scheduled in here. Go ahead.
So attendance rate. So attendance is something that we look at very closely at our high school level. It's something that we equate to engagement. And again, the same type of setup here. But what we see is, again, our pathway students overall have higher attendance rate than their peers. And our African American students are showing a higher attendance rate as well compared to their matched peers as well as to all other students. When we talk about attendance, I think it's important also to remember that on average, 1% is approximately 1.8, close to 2 days of attendance for students. And so when we're seeing some of these percents, equating that to what that means for the number of students is pretty powerful. The other area that we looked at is course failures. As we know, attendance and course failures are two of those indicators that help us determine if students will be on track not only for 9th grade but for graduation. And so for course failures, we have similar data here for all students versus our African American students. And again, we're seeing similar trends where our students within the pathways are having less course failures, and then our African American students having less course failures to their matched group as well as to all other students. So when we think about goal 3, as I brought up in the beginning, pathways, in just 1 year of implementation, we are seeing some very promising practices, and we're seeing some data that is highlighting that this is working. Our schools will share a little more, and I think that will be really important to hear from each school, but some examples of where we're seeing great success. We also wanted to share a little bit about some of the qualitative data we collected, and so we had about 300 students that completed this survey, and the survey was on students' perception of pathways, and overall, students' opinion was that they had positive opinions about pathways. We learned a lot from this particular set of information that I'll talk about in our next steps, but another example of where students are having experiences. And I think this is an interesting thing to think about when you think about 9th graders in general and what 9th graders would say about school or what they would say about the relevance of their learning within classrooms. So when we're seeing that we have pretty high numbers here for students that are seeing connections, I think that's something else that goes back to not only the work we're doing within the classrooms, but the connections that we have with our anchor partners and the relevance and the hands-on experiences that kids are getting within the class and outside of the classroom. So we've learned a lot over the last year. I would say over the last 2 years, because we had a year of planning. We've learned a lot, and we're continuing to learn. We're a quarter into our second year, and we've learned a lot just in this quarter as well. And I think Jen said it, that this is a learning opportunity for us as well as the data showing that students are doing well. We also are using this to continue to refine. We know things are not perfect at this point, and we are continuing to use our great teaching cycle of plan, teach, and reflect and adjust. A few things that I would highlight is our scheduling practices. I think over the last year and a quarter, we are continuing to examine our scheduling practices and what makes the most sense for our students when it comes to hands-on learning, when it comes to project-based learning, when it comes to the opportunities and options kids have for coursework. We're continuously thinking about the scheduling practices and how to refine those to make sure that they're student-centered and they're working for all of our kids. Another area that I think we're focusing a lot on is how we're thinking about our program of study and the course options that we have for students. I think we've done a great job around increasing our advanced placement courses and getting more students into advanced placement courses as early as 10th grade. We've added some 10th grade courses. I think we're still really thinking about our dual transcripted credited courses, the courses where students are earning college credit simultaneously, and how we can think about those options as well. Also thinking about what that means for DLI moving forward. We know that we have 2 of our schools currently implementing DLI along with personalized pathways, and another school that will be adding it next year, and paying close attention to that as well. And I would say in addition to that, around the program of study is this idea of earned honors versus standalone honors, and what we're learning about some of the scheduling complications that we have with standalone honors, where we're seeing smaller class sizes, and what that might mean for us to consider moving forward. One last thing I'll highlight, but you'll hear more of it at the school level, is this idea of teacher teaming and the power of teacher teaming within pathways, and continuing to think about how to strengthen that and how that potentially also can span outside of pathways. Some in-class adjustments that we're learning is that we spent a lot of time last year having our teachers plan and focus on this idea of these integrated projects, the projects that kids were doing across classrooms, which were amazing. And we're also trying to figure out how to just continuously tune that and refine that, because we know that that takes a lot of time. And then this idea of each school has their own theme connected to the health services pathway, and how can we have that theme pop out more within the classroom, within the instruction, and kind of across the student's day is an area that we're continuously working on. I'm going to pause here for kind of overall questions, because the next round is really going to set us up to get our schools up here and let them talk.
Okay, there's a whole lot of data that we got, and I guess one thing that struck me is that when you move away from something towards something else, stuff gets lost in the shake. And what you want to do is minimize problems that create, and so that's on the table here. So TJ, just wave me and we'll go from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a few things, and I'm probably not going to do them. Probably not going to get to them all, but some of them I think go later, actually. A couple of things on the data, and I guess this is specifically for Bo, and I don't want to get into too much detail. I kind of asked about the propensity matching and that, and got a general answer, and that's fine. And again, appreciate all the work on getting the other data today, and it was the time I had to spend with it, it was very helpful, and so much appreciate that. One thing's the propensity matching, and particularly, and as you said in the memo that was attached to it, when you drill down to school and demographic, looking for significance it's going to be hard to find. Yeah. And I guess that, but even when we look at something as dramatic as the African American things, I guess one of the things that struck me from just looking at the demographics of not the comparison group, because I don't have the demographics for the comparison group, but African American students in pathways are about twice as likely to be English language learners, meaning immigrants, as otherwise. Now, how would that fit into the propensity match you did? Would it have been a priority to have African American ELLs, or was it just matching the ELL overall?
Yeah, so the way that the propensity score matching is going to work from a technical standpoint is that it's going to get a closer match on those variables that it thinks are a bigger driver of prediction. So if you are ending up in a place where there's a bigger difference like that in the percent who are English language learners, that's because the model is saying whether or not a student is an English language learner is not quite as strong of a predictor of whether they're participating in pathways or not.
I guess the specific example I use is that in fact, among African American students, it's a huge predictor. Among students in general, it's not. And so how did your model treat that? I mean, it's a huge predictor among African American students. 7% of African American ELL students had failures, 18% of non-African American students. So I mean, that's a huge. That's the comparison group.
It's a big difference in outcomes. Yeah, the propensity score matching model is going to use all data from 8th grade or from middle school. So any outcome data shouldn't be used in a propensity score matching process. It's all about pre-participation.
Even if you look at 8th grade GPA and 8th grade attendance and 8th grade MAP scores, again. So I guess I mean. Okay, I'm gonna pass on that. I have a little bit of idea on the model, but not a lot. But that's okay because it's complex, and, and I get that.
Yeah.
And this probably isn't the time or place. Cindy, you said something about standalone honors, and I understand this, and this kind of raises a whole bunch of issues around scheduling issues, and as Dean alluded to, there's a give and take between pathways and other offerings, and Pathways expansion and other offerings. I guess I just want, and I think that this has to do with kind of the next phase of the conversation around expansion and things like that. But I just want to kind of note, since that came up earlier, is that I'm happy to have a conversation around standalone honors versus earned honors, and emphasis within the district and things like that. I'm not happy to have one that's driven by pathway scheduling. And I think that that's the cart before the horse, or something, that we shouldn't be making those kind of changes in that context. So, so that's just my position on that.
Yeah. Yes, and so one, I don't think we've made any decisions
No,
yet.
I
I think we've learned a lot, and I think what you will maybe hear from our principals, and if not now at a later time, is the consideration and the thinking around standalone honors, period, across the board, not just for pathways, and what that might mean moving forward, what the implications are for that. So I put that out there, that I don't think that the conversation is just about pathways. I think what pathways has done for us is kind of highlighted or heightened this idea of where we're seeing smaller class sizes in some places for students that are still choosing standalone, and a small number of students for that, and then this idea of this imbalance. I think that's what it's highlighted for us. It's also given us an opportunity to implement earned honors, which we started last year, and to learn a lot of what earned honors has the potential to be for our schools across the board.
And the last topic for now is that I really think we need to talk about attrition. And I think we need to talk about over the summer attrition, something 50, 55, something like that, students.
53, I think.
53.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, 50, 50, someplace between those two, about halfway. And I guess that, there's kind of two pieces of this. Number one is that, that's 12, 13%, 12%, 12 point something percent of it. And if that continues over 4 years, we end up with very small cohorts, especially at, it appears Memorial and West had most of the attrition percentage-wise. Maybe I'm wrong about that. West certainly did. There's other things that we look at attrition that the African American students were more likely to attrit than other students. And so I guess, and then in conjunction with attrition, that last year we had 415 students start. This year we had 362. 62. See, I knew you knew the number. I knew it was 360 something.
I think, don't quote me on that.
And I guess that again, this is somewhat in the context of expansion, but we have to talk about what is a viable size for a pathway. We have to, and if we if we look at it, and also the impacts of non-viable pathways on our other course offerings at our schools. So the memo said that attrition was driven by, I think that there were two things mostly.
So I'll just clarify that
Yeah.
for students that left the pathway, chose to leave the pathway and stayed within the district, we
Right.
had an exit an exit interview with them, and we collected kind of the rationale. I would say two of the major trends across the board were the ones that I provided, TJ, and one was not interested in the health services area anymore, so students felt they wanted to go into kind of just the traditional high school experience, and the other was students felt that they wanted to have a larger social network. I don't know what that means at ninth grade, but I can make some assumptions about that. I would say that those were two of the trends that we saw. We did have some students leave the district also, and we don't have the capturing of the right. We can't do that. But those were two of the highlights, I think, that we saw across the schools. And just to clarify, I think we saw the most of the attrition at West, and Karen, Baran, and Blair here, and they can talk a little bit about that if it comes up. And the other schools, I think, saw a few students here or there, and yeah.
I guess that one of the things that both anecdotally from that is that they weren't interested in health services, but more broadly, what I've heard anecdotally from a lot of people who are really happy with the Pathways program, really, parents, students who are really, really happy with it, is that they're not particularly interested in the health either.
I would say it's probably close to a 50-50 split. Yep.
And so I guess that again, in the context of the expansion discussion, is that that as we look at expansion, that and viability of size, if students are interested in the small community, the core, this and that, and there is some X number of students who are interested in that, and it doesn't matter, and and they have a slight preference for health or communications or something like that. Again, that's not universal, and that we have to keep that in mind. That if we see a drop in the health enrollment this year, if there's a second offering next year, I think we're going to see an even more significant drop. And so I think that from students who are not interested in health but are interested in the idea of a pathway, now they have two choices to go to. And so I think that we need to, and that's kind of the context for the expansion, but it came up here, so I wanted to point it here. So that's about it for now with me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Kate, anyone else? Flag me.
Hey, we don't want to talk about budget yet, right?
We'll get to that.
Okay. So that's one. I guess I have three questions. One is maybe to piggyback on the earned honors. Can you just kind of explain a little bit the context here? I think maybe also for just the group and the public, kind of what have we seen in terms of enrollment, performance, and how scheduling plays into that?
Do you want me to explain what earned honors is, or just what we're noticing in terms of
whatever
scheduling?
You think, though.
Okay.
It might be helpful.
So
The public. I think.
I'll try and do a very high level and not get too educational. What we have developed is what we believe is earned honors that we've seen across the nation, where students are scheduled into a general course, an English 1 course, and throughout that time in the course, there's a set of criteria that is predetermined and predefined in terms of what it might mean to earn honors in that. Performance tasks, a particular grade level, rigor and relevant experiences within that class. And so students don't have to opt in. Students actually have the ability through their performance to earn honors designation. In a standalone honors class, students have to make a decision in advance. Students have to opt in. And in some cases, we've seen where there's some kind of undefined prerequisites for who can go into that class based on prior coursework or prior experience. What we learned in our system was that we, as we know from OCR and some other things, we had some very disproportionate data in terms of who was accessing honors. So we wanted to attempt to do this earned honors. What we're seeing within our pathways is the majority of our students are actually choosing to go through the general coursework and take the approach of earning honors through that coursework versus taking a separate standalone honors class. So the numbers that we're seeing within Pathways, because we're trying to hold tight to this small learning community, so we're trying to offer standalone within the Pathway, within the small learning community, we're having some class sizes of like 15 and 16 students.
So less students are taking
Less.
standalone honors.
Yes. So that is the one place, I think there's been some conversations around class size. So one place that I would say that is actually truth where we're seeing smaller class size. So most students are choosing to go into the core standard English, Science, Social Studies course, and then the ability to earn honors and have honors transcription from that area. We, last year, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, we had 4 opportunities for that. So Algebra 1, English 1, US History, and Biology, and Integrated Science at Memorial, because they teach Integrated Science at the 9th grade level. In math and in science courses, we saw more students of color earning honors than we did in the English and the social studies courses. We saw large numbers of students earning it, but we still saw a little bit of disproportionate numbers of students of color. We spent this summer working with our staff to refine some of our practices and refine our performance tests to think about what that is. And now that is an opportunity that they're working on this year in 9th and 10th grade.
Did you guys by any chance track AP? I know it would be unusual for 9th and 10th, but there's nothing in the data on it.
Yeah, so if it is a course that one of our students took, we do for 10th grade. We have many students, I know at East in particular, we have many students that are taking AP Seminar as their English course, and I think they actually have 2 sections within the Pathways. Mike can speak to that better. We didn't have any students in 9th grade take AP, and that's pretty traditional across the board. You usually see students do honors and then step into AP. But we do have AP World History also offered in 10th grade.
You don't have any comparisons though?
Oh, no, I don't think so, no.
Okay, maybe it just as a
Not yet.
follow-up to understand. So what's your takeaway on the honors? I mean, it was a little hard to infer earlier. What's
My
your
takeaway in terms of what we're learning, or my takeaway in terms of next steps?
in terms of next steps?
So I think it's, we have always said that we wanted 2 years worth of data around earned honors to think about what that means for our system moving forward. And so we're in our 2nd year. I think that this is the time where we're starting to have conversations to see if we potentially have a decision around earned honors across the board, or if we keep standalone honors as well. I don't think we're at a place to make that decision, but that's what we're digging into right now. And I think it's above and beyond just the scheduling challenges. I think the scheduling challenges have just brought some light to some things.
No, I mean, there's, I guess for me, I would love to see some more information on kind of what earned honors really means in different courses.
Yeah,
versus
we said that we know that a couple of questions actually came through today also about that. So we said that we will work on some additional data over the next few weeks. Absolutely.
Second question was, it looked like about a quarter of the students enrolled in Pathways are also AVID students. Do we have any information on kind of effectiveness of one program versus the other? They're both incremental investments in students. So one thing, and I'll let anyone else chime in with this, one thing I would say is AVID, we believe, is a program and has a very specific group of students that they target. They target the academic middle. Pathways is something that we don't believe is a program. We believe that Pathways is a different way to do school and the way that we reimagine children learn. Sorry about that. And so within a Pathways model, we absolutely believe that there will still be a need for students to take advantage of AVID and what that means for the academic middle to have that elective course that supports them and really pushes that college-going culture, and that the AVID school-wide is something that is clearly aligned to how our Pathways model is. So we actually see them as complementary. Have we looked at all at kind of effectiveness of either, though, as a different way of doing school? I mean, they are both different ways of doing school. So in terms of are they, is the effectiveness best together, or are they equally effective standalone?
I haven't looked at it in that way, Kate, because we don't see AVID as a different way of doing school. It's a kind of a support system and a powerful one. But
we have effectiveness. I mean, we have we do have
Yeah, we have them
information on
compared.
how effective Avid is. I guess I'd be curious to look at
Yeah.
that group versus the others and understand, are these really a great match and
Yeah.
more effective
That we can
complementary
think about.
versus are they equally effective standalone?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about Avid is Avid will never be able to support all students, and right where Pathways is designed for all, and then Avid is designed to support a particular group of students and more intensely through that support model. But
That's
it's
fair.
something
That's
to,
fair.
I
Totally
don't
fair.
know what that might look like, but I'll.
Yeah,
We can think about it.
that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the last question is something that we'll get into with each of the schools, but I mean, my read of the data is really early days, pretty hard to draw any solid conclusions from given the sample sizes, but seemingly, you know, equal, if not slightly positive impact on young people. Can you guys pull out for us what do you think is really driving that? I mean, it's a play on, if it's not the content, the health component, is it the relationships in a small learning community, which you could do without the curricular element, say? Is it like, if you had to pick two main drivers of that kind of what you see going on, what do you think is really causing any impact?
I think this is going to be a really good question for our schools to answer. I can tell you. Did you want? Oh, I thought you wanted to answer. I can tell you what I think, and I actually don't think it's two. I think it's more than two. But I would say the small learning
Keep it to
community.
one hand.
Yeah, the small learning community, I think, is powerful because of the small group of teachers that are wrapping around our students and knowing our students well, and our students knowing each other well, and building those really strong relationships. But I think it's paired with this idea of these interdisciplinary connections and the integrated projects, kind of the more theme-based work that's happening across. When you hear from our schools, and if you ask our kids, they are saying that, like, when I go to math and I go to science and I go to social studies, like, there's light bulbs coming on because there's these connections happening across with the connected planning that our teachers are doing and our teachers working together. And there has to be a theme that it's wrapped around. And for this particular pathway, the theme is the health services pathway. So I think that, and then the opportunity to do this kind of hands-on experiential learning opportunities that our partners have been providing for them, I think just brings all of that to life. So I would say, if I had to narrow, which I wouldn't want to do, if I had to narrow, I would say kind of the combination of those.
Any
I
other
would second
comments?
that. I think what we learned specifically in the spring, not just in what we were seeing in classrooms, but actually talking to teachers and students, was this idea of the structures and systems that were in place that created opportunities for teachers to talk more about kids and to talk more about planning and not teaching in isolation. I think what you'll see across each school, because their implementation was a bit different, given their strengths and challenges with a host of issues, that some of those strengths and challenges look different in each school. But I think over time, as they continue to implement, they're going to learn internally from amongst themselves, but then also learn from each other about the very specific nuances of the pathway system that got at the heart of student outcomes.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got a lot of people here that already worked a full day, so let's get to them. And then after each school comes up, we'll save a little space to ask questions to that school directly. So let's move it on, and I think East, you're up.
Yep.
And please.
So I'll kind of, yep, thank you. I'll have East come up, and then I'll set them up, and then I'll stay off to the side for all of them, and I'll let them come here.
And please introduce yourselves when you come up as well. Thank you. Dale, have a seat, man. We got plenty.
Oh, you guys want to come on this side? That's perfect. Mike, you can come right here. So I'm just going to run through a couple of slides, and then I'm going to turn it over so that you can hear from East. But a reminder that as we're thinking about our expansion and we're thinking about our next pathway, we talked about this last spring, we're thinking about information technology communication pathway. and a reminder of our proposed timeline where we really thought about this idea of differentiated implementation based on where our schools were in terms of their readiness and where we really felt our schools need to be empowered to make the decision themselves. So we have East up, and each school is going to do a little bit of highlights and celebrations. They're going to talk about their lessons learned and kind of the adjustments from that and their rationale and their thinking for next steps in 1920. So we have Mike, Annie, and Mickey, and I'm going to turn it over to Annie.
You want to introduce yourself first?
Yes, of course. My name is Annie Potter. I am the Pathways Coordinator at East High School, as well as the Experiential Learning Coordinator. And basically, I'm here this evening to talk a little bit. I have the opportunity to talk to Pathways students on a daily basis. And what I want to share is a little bit of what the Pathways students, in answering your question, what your Pathways...
It's not a microphone, you got to
Sorry,
project.
that's right. What the Pathways students
me
enjoy about being in the Pathway. And so you can see some of our photos here. After talking to many, many students and also administering many surveys about the Pathway and also student interests, what really come away with knowing that students really enjoy the first and foremost the small learning community. That means the relationships they've built with the teachers and the relationships they've built with each other. I think that is also very important in terms of student success, is feeling comfort in the classroom, not just with your teacher, but with the other students in the class. Another thing that they have communicated that they really enjoy are the field trips and the hands-on learning and the connections that they have with our community partners. So they report, you know, it's nice to hear from real people out there in the real world and be able to have conversations with experts in subject areas that we're studying at school, rather than just kind of a theoretical study. And then finally, one of the things that we did last year was service learning. So in the spring, students were able to do some volunteering around we were studying food security and insecurity. And they, along with their teachers, went and did some service learning experiences, and the students love those. So something that the students and the teachers both report is the integrated learning was a great experience for students. They want more. So we were able to provide for them integrated projects and some basic integrated learning, as much as a teacher team can provide in 1 year of planning. And students are actually requesting more of that. So it's something they value, and they noticed, and they are asking for more.
So I'm Mike Hernandez. I'm the principal at East High School. I'm not going to go over the data. I'm changing everything. I'm sorry. Just because I want to answer a few questions that you've had. You guys have seen this data. Kate, I appreciate your question about the why, right? And I kind of want to go a little bit deeper into the why. Several things. Annie just talked about the relationships. Within our pathways, within our 9th grade academy, we have opportunities to do common planning. But we've had focus on culturally relevant pedagogy. It's really built-in cells or social emotional learning standards. Our teachers, especially in the pathways because of the cohorts, have been able to learn and adjust towards the students' needs. That is one of the major components of this. The smaller learning community, it can be tricky when you say that. It does not mean that the class sizes are smaller. In fact, they're very equal to the non-pathways classes. But one major difference, and I'm going to point at the individuals behind me, are partners. I mean, this is something that we have additional adults that are coming into the classroom, into these children's world, in which they get to know the kids. They ask questions about them, and students look forward to seeing them. However, our pathways looks very similar to our hallways. The demographics is almost equal. One of the most important things, as I've talked with students, I've talked with parents about this as well, is when they are on these experiential learning opportunities, they are seeing, especially our students of color, they're seeing mere models in the public and professional settings. That is just amazing. to me, in my opinion, these are reasons why we're seeing higher attendance, less behavioral calls, and we're seeing a difference in grades. We talk about ninth grade on track. We also talk about growth mindset. We can't focus just on Fs. We're seeing more As being earned, not given, earned. Looping back into, with our sophomores, we did create AP seminar, and then we worked with curriculum and instruction, and we're able to get that opportunity to take place of English 2, giving opportunities for our students to take additional honors and AP classes. Everybody knows that we have been working hard at breaking down the barriers so our honors and our AP classes look very similar to our hallways. That has not been the case. That is on us. And through Pathways, we're opening up these opportunities with the earned honors opportunities. I think I'm going to move forward here to this last slide. The information I just told you is that East High School is most definitely recommending that we extend to the IT pathway as well. We're looking at this not because of we do know that students, our survey data, our future students are interested in IT. What we also know is what students need is they need the structure. They need to know that the adults in front of them love them and know them. For us, Pathways is one of those avenues. Avid is one of those avenues as well. Those are choices. My question to you is, if we know that we have these opportunities, these choices, I question, should we have choices then in which you can choose out of? Because change is hard for everybody. Change is scary for everybody. If you have an option to self-select out of these pathways, you are not challenging yourselves. You are not giving this an opportunity to learn more and see more opportunities from them. I know as a 14 and 15-year-old, I never saw anything beyond the next day. I have a 15 and a 14-year-old, and I still work extremely hard at trying to get them to see beyond tomorrow. Pathways is an excellent opportunity for them to see additional options.
A little clarification.
Yes, sir.
I didn't quite follow exactly what you're trying to say. You said they should not have?
No, I am fully suggesting that we look at full implementation of Pathways across the board.
Okay. Okay.
That is my opinion. I suppose I might be speaking for East, but I am telling you as Mike Fernandez, my opinion is that.
Okay, East Side, Mike, spread it. But
Question?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I mean, I think, it's great to have the quantitative data. The qualitative data as well is so important, and to put really the faces behind this is something we have to consider moving forward, right? I mean, I think the data does tell us something and where we have to change and what, but to hear this from the Principal Hernandez and staff, I mean, it's just amazing to get that perspective, and I think we have to consider that moving forward. So, yeah, I mean, I see that we are showing some progress here, and it's great. I mean, I'm very supportive of Pathways. I think it's an opportunity.
Anybody? Kate.
So thank you. I mean, you're starting to get at like the choices, right? So Avid is a choice, Pathways is a choice. The choices underneath Pathways for me is small learning community. We could do that with or without Pathways, right? Curricular kind of integration around a theme. We could do that with or without Pathways, really. And then support from our community partners and experiential learning. Again, we can do that with or without kind of Pathways. There's sort of three big choices that we've made to weave together here. And they do all cost money and time. And so, I guess to flip the question back on you, if you want to kind of take this to its kind of natural conclusion, the other way to think about it is you have a couple $1,000,000 to use. What's the first way you use it? Is it on this, or is it on something else, or is some combination? Because that's
an excellent question. But I wonder, with your second option of integrated units or thematic unit planning. I'm not sure of very many comprehensive high schools that do that. In middle schools, and I've had some experience in their middle schools, it was a way to engage or attempt to engage all students because they could see themselves in it. Within Pathways, you have opportunities for kids to see themselves in both the class as well as the curriculum, right? If I have $2 million, whatnot, and it's me making these decisions, I 100% believe in, I started teaching in 1996 in an AVID school in Southern California. We were one of the first schools, and we had the most sections when we were at Sherman, right? We are a demo school at East. I 100% believe in AVID. AVID is a system in which it is school-wide if you truly believe in it. Married, I love the question that you ask, and I feel bad because I never asked that particular question. That's something that I want to know, and I'll probably go home tonight and start looking at that. If we could marry these two together with having AVID strategies, whatever it's the big 3, the big 6, whatnot, AVID strategies married with our partners, with these options here, again, my opinion, the comprehensive model is not working. Look across all public schools right now in the United States. It's not just Madison. It's not working for some kids. I think Pathways is an opportunity to engage all students, but with a specific lens on some kids. Kids that look like me, kids that are black, brown. To me, that's the investment. Just my opinion.
Okay. Annie spoke. Got anything you need to tell us?
I'm Mickey Smith, and I am the Pathways principal at this point. And so I think one of the things that I've seen so far, this is my second year obviously as the Pathway principal, is we've talked about the quantitative and then just also the qualitative, is just the connections that the students are seeing, but also the conversations or the stories that students are talking about, speaking about regarding the relationships that they're building with teachers, and then seeing that connection. I think, Kate, you asked, you said that we can have thematic units, we can have this separate and this separate, but one of the things that I think that students also see is that connection out into the real world, particularly with health science. You know, I can see myself as a doctor, I can see myself as a nurse or veterinarian, and so making that connection, and so talking with students is, you know, and then visiting or going on field trips, and students really getting excited about, you know, making those connections. So.
If I could add one more thing about the relationship with the community partners that we have, and then our students of black skin.
Students of color.
Students of color. Our partners have been extremely gracious in trying to organize experiences for students outside the school that are led by people who look like our students. And so our students can see that there are people who look like them who work out in the real world. And I think that this has been invaluable for our students. So we go out in the community and we see people who they can look up to. We also bring those people into our school, and students can ask them questions. And I really believe this partnership with our community partners has allowed, very frankly, they can tell you, I ask them all the time, so can we bring somebody in who looks like our students? And they say, we're doing our darndest, we're trying to find, because this benefits them as well. So, totally. Yeah, valuable for students.
Okay, I think, anything else want to add? Otherwise, we can keep rolling to
Thank you.
The east side. We'll stay on the east side with La Follette.
Thank you, East. So next we have our La Follette friends coming. So we have Chris, Whitney, and Sean. Just a reminder to speak into the recorder.
So I'm Chris Howard. I'm the Pathway Coordinator at La Follette, and I want to kind of pick up on a piece of what Annie was
talking about. It's interesting in the pathway work because each of our schools have really different personalities, and yet as you listen to our stories, we're thinking, yeah, I could tell that same, like there's interesting ways that our work intersects. And a piece of that for us at La Follette is that our focus and our theme has really taken a public health lens on community health and wellness, and we chose, as the school that is the school of, you know, named after Fighting Bob, of course, that leadership is a piece of our, we put it right in the name of our pathway. And from the very beginning, we've been working with our students around a pretty broad definition of leader. So some of us in this room have very formal roles as leaders, and others of us have informal roles as leaders in terms of being people who are using our voices and our time to influence our community. And we've really worked with our students to help them understand right from the beginning that there's all different kinds of leaders. And each time we're having our students interact with community members, we're deliberately inviting in people who are a range of formal leaders and informal leaders. We told you when we were here with you last year about our first project with our 9th graders, in which we were in our school library and we invited community members in to sit at tables, and we brought all the kids in to ask questions of these community members. By the end of the year last year with our 9th graders, our students were the experts sitting at the table with ideas about the mental health needs of their La Follette peers, and community members and families were coming in to ask the students and learn from the students' expertise. And I think that mirror model that the teachers came up with in designing the project was super powerful. And also, each and every time our students interact with people in the community, they come back and they say, wow, Miss Howard, those grown-ups took me seriously. They wanted to know what I have to say, because somehow accidentally we have made 14-year-olds feel like they don't have things to contribute. And so our pathway work at La Follette is really deliberately trying to flip that message around for our students and help them learn about their own empowerment. Our 10th grade teacher team is designing projects specifically focused on the communication skills that leaders need. So the first project our students did, the product of that was a social media campaign. The next thing they're going to be doing is a individual public speaking piece. And we anticipate that the 11th and 12th grade teacher teams will continue to pick up strands of leadership development to weave throughout the curriculum. We are seeing, it's still pretty anecdotal, but we're seeing interesting trends in terms of this universal work with our students. And then also it's worth noting that the small learning community structure of Pathways has also let us do more intensive leadership development, sort of enrichment things with a few groups of students or individual students. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Whitney Justin, who's a special education teacher who has been on both the 9th and the 10th grade Pathway teacher team.
Hi, everybody. So our initial data is looking very good. I know we've done a lot of talking about data so far this evening, but looking at the achievement of our African American students included in the pathway compared to matched peers, we had more 9th graders who were meeting 9th grade on-track benchmarks than their matched peers did, and so all that's very powerful. I know that we've that fits very well with our strong work in AVID and DLI programming that we already had going on at La Follette. And I want to talk a little bit about what the Pathways model does in order to create that meaningful change. So as far as like teacher time, we're structuring it differently than it would have been before. We have planning time across our whole team, but then 2 specific meetings per week, one about curriculum planning and the other one around student problem solving. And so we have student services team involved in that as well as our an AP. something that has made my job as a special education teacher a lot more streamlined is that I get to be involved in all the curriculum planning from the beginning rather than sort of an afterthought. And I'm working essentially with one science teacher, one history teacher, one English teacher, and then our elective teacher, ninth grade, it's career exploration, health career explorations. 10th grade, it will be body form and function. But in previous years, if I'm trying to support a student's writing goal, I would be working with multiple different English teachers around multiple different projects, just depending on where my student was placed. But the fact that I get to work with only one of these things means that I spend that much more energy out with students versus chasing teachers around. And I also know very well what that teacher's learning targets are and how they're going to be assessed, so I can be much more proactive in designing supports for kids. And so I find Pathways has just made my life that much better so that I can be a better teacher. We've also done a lot of work around creating a Pathways student identity and a sense of belonging amongst our cohorts, which I think is powerful for kids. We've already talked a lot about our kids having increased access to community members, which lends relevancy to what we're trying to do in school. And then lastly, I really appreciate how our interdisciplinary projects have allowed us to connect with families in a more authentic way, because we can invite families into the school to show them what wonderful work their kids are doing. Of course, it hasn't always been easy. There's been a lot of learning along the way. Really, when we're asking teachers to teach on a Pathways team, we're asking them to teach differently. We're asking them to use their time differently. We're asking them to plan differently. And so if an interdisciplinary project, for example, doesn't fit as cleanly within a teacher's curriculum as we thought it would when we designed it, then the Pathways work does seem like it's extra work. But if we're communicating well and often, if we're using our collaboration time, then those projects boost engagement and then boost kids' learning. It's really many hands making light work. And it's been fabulously powerful to see, and I'm proud to have been a part of it.
Thank you, Whitney. And I think an important piece to the Pathways work at La Follette High School is that we have figured out how to embed services like special education and ELL and AVID and DLI into the Pathways model so that all of our students have access to those really high quality supports, in some ways in more efficient ways, such as a more efficient use of special education teacher. We also, just quick class size comparison, our average section size for last year, 17-18, in a Pathways course was 25, and the average outside the Pathways was 25. 18-19, the average Pathways section is 27, and the average outside the Pathways is 27. And if we take a look deeper, 9 of the 15 courses we analyzed, the Pathway sizes were actually greater or larger than the non-Pathway section. So it's not because we have smaller class sizes in Pathways, it's because we're building relationships with kids differently, and the staff members on that team are working with each other in different ways. And we're excited to launch our second Pathway next year for ITC. We've had a long wait list for 2 consecutive years at La Follette High School because kids and families want to be a part of Pathways. They want that sense of identity. They want that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose, that sense of relevance. They want to be seen as special at La Follette High School. And there's a special identity that comes with being part of a Pathway cohort. And our data, our survey and family data also shows there's a high level of interest in the ITC pathway and the health service pathway. So it's not just a smaller learning community. It's not just integrated curriculum. It's not just community partnerships. It's also the health services and ITC are really interesting for kids. And not only are they really interesting for kids, they lead to careers that are really interesting kinds of careers. And finally, as we work through the challenges of adjusting our block schedule, we are confident that next year, given the adjustments we're going to make with our team this year, all of our kids are going to have access to AVID, to DLI, to our full range of electives. And because we have an extra 8th credit earning opportunity, kids will have a greater access and have more options than may be present in other places.
All right. So keep it rolling. Are any questions? Well, thank you all.
Okay. All right. Thanks, La Follette.
So
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for being here.
Oh,
All
Sean,
right,
hold on.
TJ?
Sorry.
And this actually, I probably should have asked this for East too. And probably Memorial also. But the IT communications pathway. And I guess that I kind of figured we'd talk about that later when we had the schools gone and the team and the central office team back. But I think that a school level view, one of the things that when I look at it is I'm trying to figure out how it fits together. So how does it fit together from your viewpoint? This combination of IT and broader communications theory and crisis communication, this kind of thing. So I guess that hearing your vision of what this pathway's core elements are, curricular, in terms of curricular and projects, and what brings together students, one kid who wants to code and another kid who wants to be a newscaster. So I guess hearing that from a school level, and again, I should have asked this of East too, because, but I forgot, so.
Yeah, I think the visits that we made to the QBE really opened up my eyes to this. QBE is a
It's a company that we. Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
No. We had a guide ed experience for all of our high schools over the summer where we took them on site to an organization where they could see what information technology and communications looks like in action. They could also see what innovation looks like. So they were able to go to an organization, see in action the possibilities for bringing ideas for them to life in terms of how they might kind of shape their specific ITC pathway. So it's in Sun Prairie. Yes.
Right. So, for example, QBE, they're an insurance company. And you're like, why is an insurance company? What does that have to do with information technology communication? Well, they use technology in very interesting ways to predict when accidents or what are the likelihoods of this kind of event happening or that kind of event happening? What are the behaviors that limit risk? What are the behaviors that predict risk? And they use technology in very interesting ways. One such thing is measuring the humidity and the temperature of a hay bale that may be stored in a barn, because that would predict whether or not it may start on fire. And if people in agriculture used, forget what the little things are called, the little sensors. Yeah. There's a cute little name for them. But if they use them, they could mitigate their risk, right? They could lower their risk level and they could get insurance at a cheaper rate, and there would be fewer accidents such as hay bale spontaneously combusting and burning down entire farms, right? And so I think they're called, gosh darn, I had it on the tip of my tongue for a second. At any rate, whatever organization that you choose, there are going to be elements of coding and technology use and STEM and communication embedded in it. So even if you just take your standard news organization, right? There are technologies that people are using these days to capture news that are different, such as using those drones to capture video. Those need to be programmed. They also, may use emergent technologies to predict when the next story is going to break and where it's going to break. There's just a lot of different ways that information technology communication come together in all future careers.
But I think that reinforces the idea of what integrated projects are all about, that the themes in each pathway are not about building technical skills from 9th grade. It's a way to build the skills and abilities that every student needs to have a full gamut of options upon graduation. If they choose to get more into the technical skills as things evolve in high school, by all means, they should. We don't want to limit them from doing so. But that's not what this is actually about.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, well, from La Follette all the way to Memorial.
All the way to Memorial.
Driving across town here.
So we at Memorial, we have Leslie, Matt, and Steve, and they can introduce themselves, who will be sharing a little bit.
Steve Gaszewski, the Pathways Coordinator at Memorial High School. Thank you.
Matt Hendrickson, Principal, Memorial High School.
And I'm Leslie Mitchell. I teach 10th grade English at Memorial.
I'm going to go ahead and start us out. I had a unique experience last year as I was the Pathways assistant principal. So I got to be on the ground level when we were recruiting staff and looking for teachers to take on this new challenge. One of the things that I recall and remember is the excitement teachers had with the concept of having a small learning community, a group of teachers working together with a small cohort of students to help support them in really positive ways. From the first meeting we had integrated projects, they started to see the ideas pop up as to how they could work across platforms and across their departments. That being said, they were not all health science majors, so working through that curriculum is still an ongoing thing that we work through and process through our planning. We also knew that this was something new, so a change. So we were looking at, we want to be different, we want the pathways to be new, but not so different that we wouldn't get students signing up for it. We did have 86 sign up for it, which is less than we wanted. But what was wonderful about it was a great cross-section, almost to the percentage point for our demographics for school. And so it really instilled in us the idea that Pathways was for all. Again, going back to looking at what students then began to say. We had excited teachers, we had teachers working hard, but it was really then again about what students were saying. And students noted that their teachers knew them well and know them well, and the teachers knew their students well, to the point where students would, when we'd meet with them, would say, no, our teachers talk. They know about me, they know what my skills are, they know what my needs are, going back to that smaller learning community. Again, we started out with the idea we wanted to be different, but not too different. What we're finding is students want different. And when we look at the experiential learning, students want more experiences. So this year we're looking at tailoring. We're doing smaller groups, going out to more specific sites to try and tailor needs to students' desires and wants, and exploring what's out there. Again, falling right into our academic career planning. Students look and see and say, like, I never knew that was there. My eyes have been opened. Things that we wouldn't have in a traditional classroom. And this is really key to our strong industry partners. Our partners have been phenomenal with providing opportunity and also the resources for our staff to get to understand the health field. At this point, I want to turn it over to Steve. Just talk a little bit about our data. I know it's new, but
so the data is, you saw earlier that we have seen really some positive results already this early on with our students in Pathways outperforming our non-Pathway students in the 9OT benchmarks. Also, they're failing fewer classes. The Pathway students are failing fewer classes. And that's quantitative data is great, but as you brought up, the qualitative data is really important too. And so we really wanted to make sure that we got student voice. And so this year I interviewed every single 9th grader in Pathways, and I'm planning to do it with 10th grade. And we asked them, what did you like about Pathways? What do you want to improve about Pathways? What do you hear themes, connected themes in your classroom? Do you have a adult at Memorial that really cares about you? And that was the thing that really stood out. I mean, they're very honest, and everything that we want Pathways to be is coming out. What we want students to experience, they're experiencing it. And it was 92%. When I looked at it, that said adult at Memorial cared about them. And I thought that was really powerful. And trust us, the 8% that didn't say that, we are going to work with them one-on-one to make sure that understand why they aren't connected. But that's that sense of belonging is what we want for students, and it's really coming across strong in Pathways.
Next, I'm going to ask Ms. Mitchell here to talk a little bit. She's our sophomore English teacher, so she's had a unique experience in the sense that she was having students come that had already had community into her classroom.
Yeah, I guess I would say that on a personal level, for me, the most important thing is that kids feel a relationship between myself and their classmates. And so the idea of having a bunch of kids come to class that already knew each other and already had spent time together was kind of terrifying. And it felt like I didn't have a lot of control, because in normal classes, I get to grow and learn a lot more about them, and they learn a lot more about me and each other as we go through the year. But with Pathways, they come in knowing everything about each other, more or less. But But what was really amazing to me was when they came to my classroom, they knew each other, they had relationships, but because they had had that experience in 9th grade, they knew that the teachers that were involved in Pathways really wanted to get to know them, and so right away they were open with me, they invited me to get to know them, and I felt right away that, oh, this is actually a lot easier because now they all know each other and I can just kind of squeak in without them realizing anything is different. And it just felt like they were even more eager to learn and wanted to be connected to their subjects and see that everything fit together. And then with that piece, the idea of teacher teaming was a really interesting idea for me coming in, and knowing what was going on in all the different subjects was really eye-opening to know that, you know, before I was just in the English wing, doing my thing, hanging out in my classroom, not really knowing what was happening anywhere else. But then getting to talk to my colleagues in the science wing and talking to social studies and talking to math, it really felt like together we could not only plan those integrated projects to make kids feel like they were stronger and more connected to Pathways, but also knowing that if there was a student who was struggling in my class, I could talk to the teachers in their other subjects to try to see what worked for them and what maybe didn't work, and how we could just wrap ourselves around them and even make those connections stronger between us.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that it is early data, but from what we're hearing from students and teachers, from what we actually got last year, we decided that the small learning community was something we wanted to move forward. So we actually cohorted all of our 9th graders this fall. So all 9th graders are cohorted, which sets us up very well for a new pathway. Probably even more exciting about that is when we started talking about communication technology in that pathway, we had business and art, and I had actually met today. They're extremely excited about the concept of building the curriculum around that. And also knowing that we have a 8th grade feeder program was high interest rate. We are looking to move forward with information communication technology for the next school year.
Can you just very briefly explain to me a little bit more about what you meant when you said you cohorted the entire 9th grade?
So we took our 9th graders and basically assigned them assistant principal, and then we cohorted the English teacher, science, math, social studies. So they, similar to a pathway.
How large a group is a cohort?
Well, it's basically a quarter of the building.
Okay.
For the most part. I mean, it's not pure yet. There's always some anomalies, but it's close, which allows us the similar teaming model that Pathways has, without obviously the curriculum cross-content.
TJ, then Kate.
Actually, I was going to ask about cohorting, but I'll have a follow. And then I also want to ask the same question I asked, to follow it around the IT communications thing. When you said a quarter of the building, do you mean a quarter of the class?
Quarter of the class,
yeah. If you're cohorting by English, science, math, and social studies, so the kids who took algebra in 8th grade are all in a single cohort because they're all in geometry, or in 2 cohorts, away from the kids who are taking algebra now for all their core classes?
I'm not sure exactly how to.
Well, so if a kid is in geometry,
right, correct,
then the kids in his geometry class are the same kids who are in his English class?
As close as we could get.
Okay, as close as you can get?
Yeah.
And his science class or her science class?
Yeah. I would say probably 80% you have students that are accelerated in math, and they're just going to be outside of the cohort for their math class. That's typically where that happens is a math.
Okay, so the math classes tend to be outside the cohort because that's where the accelerations happen.
Correct.
I guess that maybe you can see where I'm going is that I'm very worried about segregation. Segregation, racial segregation, economic segregation, other isolation, and if you use, and again, the math is the place where in 9th grade the math is where those differences are going to be the most stark. But there'll be other differences, who takes honors, who takes AP, and as this goes up. So I guess that as we look at cohorting high schools based on these kind of things, I think we have to be really wary of the segregative impacts.
I think maybe for example, with 4 neighborhoods, if I have a student from each in, let's say they're in geometry honors or pre-calc or whatever it is, they wouldn't all be necessarily cohort in one field. They could fall within all 4 of them and have their math outside. So it wouldn't be cohort in that way. No, we were conscious of that.
Okay. The second question is the question that I asked, and I don't even, it's not even really a question, but it's, I guess, I'd like to hear from your words, your vision of the kind of curriculum and projects and what the IT communications pathway would look like on the ground. So, if you've thought that far ahead.
We have. So, and Matt was really integral in this, but when we thought about this pathway in the summer, we were intentional actually at Memorial, and I think East might be doing too, but we put information communication technology, so we put the C in front of the T to get at that point, to understand that there's going to be students interested in information and communication both, and allow them to have that. And so we are following a model similar to what East did with their health pathways of social justice, that there are both both art classes and business classes, and they're working very closely and looking at those projects to allow for those students to pursue those different interests in that. So we are intentional actually about that, about saying it's communication and technology to allow for that and some fluidity in taking classes, knowing that these are the skills we want to have, and there can be some fluidity. You want to talk?
Well, I think what you might consider is at freshman level, you have kind of a mix of both, and then giving students an opportunity to look at, well, I'd like to go down this or down this, so kind of a pathway within a pathway potentially.
Branching pathways. Thank you.
Kate's next.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about the cohorts as well. So it sounds like you've essentially kind of gone down a wall-to-wall path-ish in ninth grade.
Yes.
And so I guess 2 questions. One is, I wondered if you'd found any different solutions to the honors question, given that you have a bigger section of kids that are cohorted. And second would be related, which is, have you been able to do that without any extra resources, or found ways to share resources differently, given again that you have a bigger group of children and staff that are participating? Does it change the way you can schedule or change the way we can use resources? Or
no, we kept the same resources. I mean, we were very deliberative in that, and that's a matter of just balancing the schedule and looking. There are certain staff that are kind of mixing across 2 cohorts potentially, just because of the courses they're teaching. We have not necessarily found a solution to honors. Those are some of the anomalies where students may be outside of their cohort in an honors class, just depending on how many students are electing to do honors, because there's only so many honors sections.
So essentially the honors sections are all living outside of all of the cohorts.
In much
and
of
they
the
would be
area,
a shared resource,
which allows
across.
us then to pull from all cohorts, so that we're not creating that individual cohort of just honors students.
But you have the same number of standalone honors courses
Yes.
as you had last year.
Yeah, so students that requested honors in the beginning of the year, those numbers did not change.
Okay.
So if they requested it, that we were able to put them in an honor section, but it might live outside of their cohort.
Thank you.
Cindy?
So we have West coming up. There's just one thing, TJ, to your question. All of our schools around the ITC pathway did have the summer kind of time away and have started to think through a program of study. And we've been working with our post-secondary partners to think about what that might mean for students in terms of those that want to go industry cert versus those that want to go kind of different routes. So they're in initial stages, but I just wanted to put that out there, that each school is thinking about it a little differently and in initial stages of that. The only other thing I would add is in terms of resources, I think that when we think about ninth grade, we made an investment as a system to really think about the class size at ninth grade and trying to cap that at 25 as well, which is an ability that has allowed Matt to really think about how to do that across the board. So just something important to note, that was something we did system-wide. So thank you, Memorial,
Okay.
Appreciate you. And West,
West
last
Side.
but not least, we have Karen and Blair.
I see you brought your West Pathways pen.
Oh,
Very nice.
you get what you get.
Very nice. Mine's an old Beck. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you. I'm Karen Baran. I'm the principal of West High School.
I'm Blair Feltham. I taught U.S. History 9 in the Pathway last year, and this year I'm the Pathways Learning Coordinator at West.
In year one, West students explored health career pathways through a social justice lens, which is really in keeping with the tradition of West and West students. So we felt it was a good match. We want to talk about our Student Ambassador program as a real success. They went to Nashville and they learned leadership skills, and they used this to really become true advocates for our program. They spoke in parent groups, in front of teacher groups. They were key recruiters in our outreach program this year. They also came and spoke in front of you. Some of the challenges that the West Pathways team faced last year were in the range of demographics in our Pathways program did not reflect the range of demographics in the school, particularly in the area of English, language, and diverse learners. And in particular, this greatly impacted our English language learners. They had 1 semester of coursework in the Pathways if they were at DPI level 1 or 2. The vast majority of these students were new arrivals to the country. We also wanted to talk about class sizes last year in 17-18. Our Pathways classes hovered at about 21, and our regular classroom, non-Pathways classrooms hovered at 27. We received another FTE, and we were able to get it closer to about, if you can have half a student, about 27.5. This year, short students. This year, our Pathways classes hover at 27 in our regular classes. At least during the summer, we made every intention of getting it at 25. I think we're at about 26%, so or 26 per classroom. So that has truly hovered out. Didn't I say that the Pathways classes?
Okay.
Okay, 29 to 30, I stand corrected.
Okay.
Good job.
Sorry.
Can you go back to the correction?
Sure. So our Pathways classes are 29 to 30 kids, and our regular classes are about 26.
Like my colleagues at other schools, I would echo that the power of Pathways last year was really in the small learning community and the teacher teaming. We had students come and present at a PD in March. So they say, well, how's Pathways going? And the students over and over again said, well, our teachers really know me, they talk, and they really get us, and they care about us. And then me and my colleagues got up and talked, and we said, well, what's working for us with Pathways? And we said, well, we get to meet. We have common planning time. So we got to meet for more than 130 hours during the school year, during our regular school day, to talk about curriculum and students. Like the other schools, Tuesday would be curriculum, Thursday would be student-centered meetings. And that is not something that you get in schools, really, unless it's really, really thoughtfully put in like it was with Pathways. And it's critical for making learning experiences for students really, really come alive. It's critical for supporting students through struggles, to have the adults who serve them in a school be able to meet. If you don't have that, what you get is one teacher going into Infinite Campus, clicking open the kid's schedule, clicking on their course, getting the name of the teacher, putting it in their email, getting the name of the next teacher, putting their email, saying, hey, do you know what's going on with so-and-so? Maybe you get a response, maybe you don't. So this small learning community and teacher teaming is absolutely, absolutely critical, and is the power move for us. If you are curious about the kinds of projects that we created for students at the 9th grade level, there are 2 projects. The first is Who Am I? Using data to understand self and world, and it's like a data analysis and data collection research project. And then it's Muck, Making Unnatural Causes Known, which is another research presentation based on the social determinants of health that students learn about and select. And then in the 10th grade year, the teaching team is working on a project, or a year-long project called Professional Communication, in which they are taking academic work and translating it into alternative modes of communication, like social media posts, or like a memo, or like documentation for an organization, like guidance. So they're doing all of that in the 10th grade year. What else did I want to say? Oh, right. So that all sounds really good, and it is really good, and I'm really, really proud of the work that we did last year with students, specifically around structured group work. So not only do they feel that their teachers know them, but they feel like they know each other, because we've set up situations where they can get to know each other in really particular kinds of ways beyond just like we're all teenagers and are all friends or not friends. So I'm proud of that. Unfortunately, we do not have students pounding down our doors to join our program. We have 59 students at the 9th grade level right now, which means we have 2 pathways sections. That is not enough to really make it shine. It's just not. The kids are with each other all day long. There's no mixing, and that gets tiresome for them. It's also really not workable for teacher load, because you've got 2 sections of pathways and then 3 sections of non-pathways, and you've got all of this energy on the integrated curriculum and the student support and pathways. Then you know you've got 75 other students. So we are. I am happy with the work that we've done over the past several years, but we are not seeing the kind of excitement we need to be seeing to make pathways, the promise of pathways, which I believe in, really happen at West. And so our goal for next year
is to differentiate. Well done. Is to differentiate, because we're not getting the excitement and the energy that we feel we should. We spent so much time last year being super clear about addressing misconceptions, because our students said we expected something different. We were promised something different. And so we were really clear in our outreach. We also thought, with 59 students, we thought class size would go down because kids will drop out. Kids are not dropping out of this cohort. We're seeing a very different, because this cohort reflects the actual population of the school outside of Pathways. But it does tell us that we need to differentiate for Pathways expansion. And so rather than adding a new pathway in 1920, what we want to do is take a step back and go back to our, and re-engage with our stakeholders in building interest and understanding about what Pathways is and what it is not. And so we propose to spend the next year developing 2 additional thematic pathways. So when you were talking about themes earlier, that's where we're seeing the residents in the West community, the residents in the West community, and the West staff about themes for pathways. We'll spend next year developing these 2 additional thematic pathways based on community interest and their viability at West, and then implement them both along with Health Services cohort for full West implementation in 2021. With regard to the future development of our current pathway, we will be rebranding Health Services Pathway to take advantage of West students' body's strong historical interest in social justice. So while Health Services will continue to be a component of the integrated project and of the curricular correction, the real focus will be on social justice. So we believe that having groups of teachers supporting a cohort of students in 3 thematic pathways in 2021 will allow us to address misconceptions by students, staff, and the West community at large, as well as leverage the enthusiastic buy-in that we're seeing from West staff about this idea of a thematic pathway that will help us drive West going forward.
Okay. You want to ask that question?
Which actually no, because they're not doing.
They're not doing it.
But
I have lots of ideas.
But we.
Right, Gloria first, then TJ.
I'll go third. Yeah.
So,
you want?
I'm just wondering.
You're third.
Since we don't have the excitement and we have lost some students at West, I mean, what are you hearing from the West community, parents, specifically on the reasons why? I mean, because and the misconceptions I've heard as well, particularly from the West Side community. I'm just wondering what that is, right? I mean, we've heard the themes and demographics and the success in different schools. I'm just wondering what is different about West.
I think that
Is there something different?
I think that my understanding is that people really saw it as a career pathway. And so they drew their own conclusions about what that meant. We're hearing less and less and less pushback all the time.
I would agree. I would say there was a misconception in the West community that Pathways meant you want my 8th grader to choose a job.
Right.
And there was a misconception about what would happen in the Pathways courses. So for example, I taught U.S. History 9, and I taught U.S. History 9 in a pathway. Most days it was U.S. History 9. We wrote one document-based question that was about public health, and we did some other stuff, but the curriculum didn't go away. It's not as if kids didn't learn the material that they needed to learn. But that was a misconception. And then the idea about choice, because a Pathways program of study has a CTE component, and you look at how many given courses can my kid take over the course of their high school career, and you want to remove a certain number of them and put them towards something else, we got a lot of pushback about that too.
Yeah, maybe just to the elective.
Wait a minute.
I was just going to answer some of the question, but.
But just a follow-up question on that. I mean, are we seeing the demographics match the demographics of the school?
The 59 students that we have in 9th grade now do match
the
school.
All right.
Okay. TJ.
So when you say full by 2021, that's wall-to-wall pathways for your 9th grade cohort?
3 pathways.
3 pathways,
3.
approximately 166 students.
About 175. 175.
175, okay.
But let's think about the logistics of that. If we just add another pathway in 2021, then you'll have almost a third of the school not pathway, and the rest of the school in pathways. And we just think if we're going to do it wall to wall.
This will be an ongoing discussion.
Conversations.
And the decision will be made at this table. So just to, I want to ask, you talked about, we just kind of did the other end of how, 166, 170, whatever, viability. One of the things, can you talk more, clearly 59 and 50 is not a viable size. No. For reasons that are clear. What is a viable, what is the small end of the viable size?
I can speak to that based on what I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted. You have direct experience in trying to arrange the teacher schedules and this and that. That's what I'm looking for.
3 sections. I mean, if we're saying that ideal class size is 25 and we're assuming that's what we're going with, so 3 sections is minimum viable, because then you get students can mix and they're not just like on each other all day long, and you have more than half of a teacher load, so they're focusing their energy on most of their day. I think is the low end of what's viable.
I guess the teacher teaming is the one piece that kind of concerns me with the small. As you said, people have divided attention between the intense integrated planning with pathways, and then there are other courses, and so I guess that at 3 sections, which would be approximately 75 students, the teacher schedule would be 3-2, 3 in pathways, 2 outside.
So what I imagine, like I said, this is
this
is just me imagining what it could be like at West.
You've been there.
I'm imagining that at a 175-person cohort, you would have 2 teachers in each core subject as part of the teacher team. So you would have 2 English 1 teachers. One would have 3-2, and one would have 4-1 to cover all of those sections of kids. And then those non-pathways courses I would expect be outside the pathway or upper level courses that aren't in the pathway.
Can we let Cindy get in?
Yeah, I want to chime in a little in terms of the original design. And when we think about a small learning community, we've always said the number around 125, and 125 for us is for a few reasons. One, for this number of students that we would see within a pathway together, and then secondly, we've talked about a teacher being in that pathway, and that they would be having a full load within that pathway. And right now, most of our teachers teach about 5 sections. So when you think about the small learning community, 5 sections for an English teacher would be a health services English teacher, an ITC teacher. One of the things that I just want to note is that at West, we are thinking a little differently about their model overall based on what we've learned to date. And so we want to spend the next year really thinking about what does this mean to reconceptualize pathways at West, what kind of additional engagement might we get in, and then where West is in terms of kind of their overall structure of number of classes and some things that are viable under their current kind of brick and mortar building that they have. But to answer the original question, around a small learning community, the ideal state would be approximately 125, which is how we have originally done our application process. La Follette is a little different on their block, but close to that same number. I just wanted to clarify that.
And just one more,
Thanks.
which is about, Karen, you seem to emphasize the word thematic. And so I guess if you could talk a little bit about what that means to you as opposed to the way pathways have been conceived previously and elsewhere?
Pathways can be conceived of 2 ways. One's the thematic pathways, and the other one is a career cluster. When we work with our staff, there is so much more energy and enthusiasm for thematic programming than programming around careers. It allows more flexibility. More teachers can, this is what they tell us, more teachers can see themselves and their work fit within the pathway if it is thematic rather than if it is career. So I'm not sure how significant a difference it is, but if it pulls my faculty along, then let's do it.
I thought that's what you meant by it, but I was glad I wanted to hear it. And I think that, you know, that careers can be thematic, but maybe thematic. I don't know. One of those is an umbrella. I'm not sure, but careers are not an umbrella for thematic. Thematic is broader and bigger.
We're really grateful to have the opportunity to consider next year as a planning year to figure out how this is going to work in this big beast of a school that we have.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
So. 3 questions, and the last one maybe I should have asked other folks as well, so if other folks want to chime in. I mean, the first is you raised kind of kids being on top of each other a little bit in a smaller community. I wonder, and maybe this is for everyone as well, by 11th and 12th grade, do we think a 100-student cohort is going to feel good and full of really positive, great relationships, or do we think it's going to feel small?
I want to talk about this so much. I talk about this all the time because I'm like thinking about it all the time. In my vision, this is just the Blair Feltham vision, right? Like, it's just me. We replicate the gradual release of responsibility, the framework that we use in our classes every day, which is like I'm going to do it, I'm going to show you how to do it, and then we're going to do it together, and then you're going to try it on your own, with our whole pathways design, so that in 9th and 10th grade, you've got 4 core classes that you're with, 175 or 100 or however many kids it ends up being in 9th and 10th grade. And then by 11th grade, it really loosens up, and your pathways core goes from 4 classes to just 2. One class that sort of would house a lot of ACP stuff and student not independent projects, that's its own thing. Integrated projects that are student driven, and some of the flexible scheduling and work-based learning stuff that we're hoping we can do at the higher grades. And then 1 paired elective, so that most of your day is then like whoosh, mix in with the other 11th
So you're
and 12th
saying you
graders.
have interaction with more than 100
Yes.
students by 11th.
Yeah.
Because I think,
Okay.
yes, it would feel,
okay.
It could feel really
I got it. You
claustrophobic.
can move on. The second one, so you mentioned kind of being a big school, right? West is 25-50% bigger than our other high schools?
Not quite.
Okay. It's bigger. I don't know how much.
It's bigger.
I'm just curious how you think that's changing, if you think that's a part of the story here at all. And I'm kind of curious that the idea of trying out just small learning communities without the thematic hasn't elevated given the size of West. So
That's the math problem.
This is a larger conversation, and if the board wanted to talk to me about it, I would be glad to talk to you about it. We have 2,300 students. We have 84 rooms. We have X amount of teachers, X amount of classes, X amount of periods in the day.
okay, fair enough. So let me keep us moving then. The last question is just, we've heard a lot about kind of good things happening. I know one of the kind of critiques of Pathways within the West community has been that as a participant in Pathways, some electives would become unavailable to a student, and because of the cycle of number of students in an elective, we would then have to eliminate certain electives, right? So the choice of what you could take would go down as a student. What else, if anything, is a downside? And this is the question that's sort of open for everyone. And if you tell me nothing, I'm really not going to believe you. So, I mean, just what else is kind of a con, I guess, or something that is an opportunity we should continue to try to
Is this where we talk about the changes in the program for study?
Are you asking like more broadly, like the Pathways model, or in particular?
What are you seeing as downsides or areas that we need to continue to work on as we roll this out?
Sure,
I mean, the loss of electives, I think, is a downside, right? I think the potential limiting of honors for me is a major flaw. So there are challenges inherent. There are also tremendous upsides, as we've heard. So I guess I'm looking for the flip side of the coin.
I can speak to that. I think you can look to other school districts that have done not similar but similar enough things. You want to be really careful about pathway reputation. In other schools where they have done school within a small school or small learning communities, one gets a reputation for being for a certain type of student or not for a certain type of student. And that, I mean, you see that like famously at Berkeley High School, and that's a real risk. I think that where we talk about wanting students to have similar experiences no matter what high school they're in, no matter what course they're in, at what high school they're in, so that students who are mobile will be able to have a really robust education. And then you have different pathways at different schools working on different projects. That's a challenge. And then I think the logistical, it's not a downside, but it's a big challenge, is the logistical piece of how do you make all of these particular needs for people to be in a particular place at a particular time function.
Does anyone else have any comments or?
So I look at, you asked the question about electives or whatnot. Last year I ran some data on 4-year trend of high class, low enrollment or low requests, high fail rates, and high drop rates. And that's where I identified areas of are we doing this because the student wants the class, or are we doing it because historically a staff member wants that class? And so we try to use data to make that decision. I think another issue that we might run into, which we will run into in the future, is with experiential learning opportunities, the standard 8 to 3:30 day. It's going to be extremely tough if we were looking at opportunities in our public, right? And so I think that's going to be one of the questions. And then the typical 185-day with the 3 months off in the summer. And that's a huge question in the district when we look at the pathways opportunities during the summer. How do we look at doing that, right? Those are things that have been on my mind. Thanks.
Okay.
I think the one thing that we didn't foresee is our planning time. And when you take a Pathways day away, you take all of the Pathways teachers out, so those students have a substitute teacher for most of their classes during that day. So we're working on trying to figure out how to build those planning times into the day for teachers.
Cindy, there is another team that's here that isn't scheduled to speak, but would you mind just introducing them and telling us who's here and where they're from?
And I assume you're talking about our
Well, we keep getting alluded to the four musketeers back there. Who are you guys?
So I will take a minute just to introduce, because I think you heard from the schools, but I would echo that Pathways, it would not be possible without the work of the people behind us also, and a full community support. So we have Pat Schramm from Workforce Development Board. We have Hugh from the City of Madison. We have Marshall, who kind of coexists between MMSD and also the Chamber, and is a liaison to set up a lot of these experiential learning opportunities. And we have Bridget from UW Health.
And I will mention that Leslie Orancha wanted to be here and texted me during the meeting that something came up. Yeah, so she's here in spirit.
Where's she from?
UW.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah. So we have Madison College also, we have Edgewood, and we have Dane County as the other anchor partners that couldn't be here tonight, that are just part of this work, like, through and through.
Yeah.
So,
personally, I don't think we can have an excellent school district without community partnerships. So thank you for coming, and the work that you're doing on this. I just wanted to let you know that. Gloria?
So I know, in the city, we're moving towards investing in youth internships, and I'm just wondering if that is part of this. Do we actually place students in? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the city always looks for opportunities to align outcomes, and the Pathways initiatives gives the city, whenever we fund employment opportunities or community centre after school, it gives us a nice opportunity to align. So, for example, in our internships, we asked the community-based organisations to offer the same or similar sort of support as, say, AVID, to do career and college readiness, to do employability skills and leadership certificates. All opportunities to link back to the school district is where the young person will graduate from.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Yes,
and thank all the rest of you, too.
Thank you.
So, Cindy, we got next steps.
well, yep, we're almost done. Before the next topic. So I just, I cannot thank our schools enough for their time and for being here, more importantly for their work. But just a couple next steps as we're thinking about expansion is this idea of class size and scheduling has come up, I think, not only when I started in the beginning, but throughout the presentation. So we want to really continue to monitor class size and pay close attention to what's happening within the pathway, with outside of the pathway, as well as adhering to our class size policy. And then really paying attention to this idea of our scheduling practices and thinking about the balance of the class size within standalone honors inside and outside of the pathway. I would add to that, Kate, to your question earlier, is continuing to see what we're learning about the difference between standalone and earned honors, and just what we are learning from that as we continue to throughout this entire year. And then this idea of budget came up many times, and as you know, last year we had a priority action ad of $200,000 to support professional development and resources for the pathway. And moving forward, we're going to really use our current structures and systems that we have in place for allocation and workbook time to be able to make adjustments there, and continuing to look for grant opportunities. We have Joyce funding that will continue through the 2019 school year and potentially beyond that, and to use that. So I think there was a question around how much more, and at this point we don't see an add of budget. We see using many of the systems and structures that we have now, because it'll be more of shifting versus adding. And then the last thing I would say is just a timeline that will come back in the fall of 2019 again with updates and where our schools are at in terms of thinking about next steps. And we just have our last piece that we'll talk about at the end of the month again around our recommendation to approve the expansion for that second pathway at 3 of our 4 schools, East, La Follette, and Memorial.
TJ.
You just want to clarify?
Yes.
I think we need to be clear what the Validate Pathways Implementation Timeline means. I see an implementation timeline that I heard tonight was wall-to-wall at less than 2 years. And that's very different than what you just said.
Yeah, that's not
So,
what we're asking approval on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, as we think in the future, we try to figure out how we think about this. I understand that other people are making the decision.
No, what I'm doing is, I'm just trying to clarify we're going to be voting on at the end of the month.
Yeah,
that's all I'm doing.
Just to be real.
It's just, that's what I want clarity on.
Yeah, we'll be asking for approval on the expansion to one additional pathway at the three of the 4 comprehensive high schools. It's just the next step.
Yeah, we're
next
looking
school
for
year.
a validation for next school year.
Yeah, just the one
1920.
additional IT pathway.
So it's iterations. And that's all. I just wanted clarity on that.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it.
Maybe to piggyback on that, if we could have some insight into how you guys are thinking about honors as a part of that expansion.
Sure.
That would be helpful. And just something in writing around budget. I mean, I think this data is early but helpful. The one piece for me that was missing is around kind of cost benefit, right? So this has been an investment. If we're not adding more this year, that's maybe good, maybe not. I mean, if this is really working, maybe we shouldn't be making that choice, right? But irrespective, counting what we have invested already, which is a significant number of people and time, is something that I'd like to see before voting on kind of continuing. So even at a very simple level.
All right, you got it.
Yep.
And to piggyback on Kate on the budget piece, I understand that you can't at this point saying where you're going to reallocate from, be it planning, be it professional development resources or staffing resources. I'm not asking for that, but some kind of sense of the quantity of reallocations that you're looking at, either at the district level or at the individual schools, would be helpful. And and again, ballpark, someplace between 1.5 and 2.5 FTEs is better than knowing nothing.
Yep. Good.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, I think we can wrap this one up.
Thank you,
all
Cindy.
for-
Thank you,
for
everyone.
coming.
Thanks for your help.
Thank you.
So our next one will be on STEM.
That last slide.
Need to-
Actually, we didn't get to it, but that's where the recommendation is.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate you all.
But this,
There it is.
there's a lot underneath there that.
There's a lot buried, yeah.
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to take away resources from something else to make that happen, then we need to know what we're taking away from.
It's an instructional design decision, but we can.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to move away from having standalone honors because we don't think we can schedule it, that's.
Thank you.
No, it's both. I mean, it is. Yeah. It isn't. It's just broad brush, right? It's going to change between now and next year.
Okay, everybody, take a breath. We're into the shorter one now. So this is a high-intensity partnership approval that we need to discuss. And Cindy and Lisa, are you guys manage this? Or Jen, do you want to get right into it? Take it away.
No. So, do you want me to start? Okay. So, hi again, everybody. I'm up here again. So we are talking about our Early College STEM Academy. You have 3 documents that you received. One is the high-intensity MOA that we're looking to vote on at the end of the month. And then I also wanted to provide an update for you on our current cohort that is over at Madison College and give you a progress update of that lives within a different MOA as a medium intensity, but to show where our students are and kind of the progress that they're having to date. What the high intensity MOA is a 4-year MOA that we're looking to have an expansion of the Early College STEM Academy next year, starting with 100 students, and the goal being 200 students in the Early College STEM Academy. And then those students would actually be located at the new South Campus that will open in the fall, as opposed to our current cohort of students that are over at the Truax campus. One thing that I tried to provide in the progress update that I thought was really powerful and amazing is we just did kind of an informal survey with our students, midpoint for them, and I shared with you some of the open-ended responses from the students just to let you see kind of what they're thinking, what they're saying as an insight to the experiences so far.
Laz?
Oh,
who is
yeah,
the great Laz?
Yes. So that's everybody was like, who is Laz? So I think that's a great question, which you'll see is outlined in the high intensity MOA in a similar way. Laz is what we call our resource specialist, and it's one of the positions that Madison College has committed to fund and support the students. So they act as what I would call a liaison / counselor for the students. So he's directly connected to the students. The students check in with him every morning. He checks in with the teachers on a regular basis. He is the person that communicates to the families and to the students around a bi-weekly progress report that they have, and then is also there if they need to problem solve or are having any challenges as well. So he is like their direct point of contact that is tied to them for the next 2 years. That's who Laz is.
Does he have a full name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Enriquez, Laz Enriquez is his last name.
Thank you.
Laz. All right.
So at this point, I really just open it up for questions or anything that you might want to know more about. Yeah. Oh.
Well, there's yeah. Go ahead. You ready?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
First
TJ.
up, if I read the MOA correctly, we're looking at up to 200 students, and I guess. You know, one piece of that is that I have some concerns about the impacts on our high schools of pulling 200 students out. And we just talked about how Pathways limits the number of students enrolling, you know, and that any program that has requirements and limits choices is going to place limits on students enrolling in classes that have already are on the edge of being canceled because of low enrollment. And so I guess I have some concerns around that I think we really need to keep an eye on. And then the other piece was that, you know, I asked for data for eligibility, and I appreciate that. And it's really eye-opening. I showed it to Mary when she walked in, and I said it's depressing. And it's depressing because what it says about the disparities that exist within, you know, only 30% of our low-income students, only 17% of our African-American students would be eligible for this program. And the eligibility requirements aren't that, I mean, they're not that outrageously difficult. I mean, you know, 2.5 grade point average, enrolled in essentially a college prep curriculum, passing those courses, 90% attendance. The 90% attendance might be difficult for special education students and other people with family, but these are not. This is not asking a lot, and I asked for that. Number one is because I think it provides a snapshot of where we are with our 10th graders, and again, there's disparities there that aren't pretty. But secondly, I also think that we have to be very conscious as decision makers of who this program is likely to serve. And it doesn't mean we should or shouldn't do it because it's who it's likely to serve. But if we look at this as an equity initiative, and we note that 17% of only 17% of our African American students even meet the minimum qualifications, much less going through the next piece of the process, I think that forces us to look at it in a different light. I think that this, particularly in light of how the South Madison MATC campus has been presented to the community as an equity initiative, that we need to be very careful about that, and you know, so that's the two reasons I asked for the data, and again, I appreciate it. There's a lot of good things in this partnership. You know, I'll come back to that I worry about that it's not that we have students who that it's a nice thing for students who are doing well, but we have students who are so far from doing well that and I know that we have people working with and for them every day, but this feels a little like a shiny object which is distracting from those students. Not a lot, but a little like that. So I guess that's my comment. I plan to vote in favor of it. It's not, you know, not that level, but these are concerns that are ongoing, and I think that as we look at our monitoring metrics and things like that, we need to be very high on
Mary
that.
and Gloria.
Oh, I'd love to chime in on that.
Or Jen, did you want to start?
Yeah, if I could just respond to that real quick. I agree. I had the same level of questioning Cindy knows about both the results and the MOA, and I agree. I think our intent behind this program is for it to serve a particular population of students who otherwise wouldn't have this opportunity. And it is about going above and beyond what even our comprehensive high schools can offer in the best possible state. I mean, it's really a terrific opportunity. And I think as we live the life of the MOA, we need to be paying close attention. I mean, this first cohort, 25, it was, you know, truly the group that signed up to help us get the kinks out of it. And there is an opportunity for us to look closely at the entrance criteria. I'd like to be able to test that and push it. I think there are students who are underperforming in high school who have much higher skills than they're able to express. Because of their lack of belonging and sense of positive identity in school, right? There are other factors at play. And if given the opportunity, right, to thrive on the
flexibility
Madison.
within the MOA
I think we should talk about
to
that,
pick
yeah.
up, to say, let's pick up 25
Right.
kids who don't meet the criteria, and let's do it. But have an interest, and let's, you know, let's
Give 'em
do
a
that.
shot. You know, and
Give them a
really
shot.
interesting.
I mean,
Let's
let's
let Mary
do that.
get in.
And
Yeah.
so anyway.
Let's get Mary get
So
in.
that's where my
How many of the 10, because you grouped African American, Asian, and Latino together in the first cohort, 10, how many can you break those down?
So the reason I wound up having to group them together is because if any one of those demographic groups was less than 7, that we weren't able to report out. So I don't know.
I'm not looking for a report out. I just want to know how many students are in the program. That's not a report out of any sensitive data. It's just knowing how many are in the program. We had 10 out of the 26 were grouped together as African American, Asian, Latino. I'd like to know how many African American students are in the program.
Isn't it right here?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I could pull up the spreadsheet and I can give it to
Isn't
you.
it right here?
Yeah.
No, it's-
Yeah. I understand your question. I don't want to give you the wrong number right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that why are we going to 100 right off the bat? Why not 50?
Oh, gotcha.
I would say for a few reasons why I think we want to go to 100 is this first cohort we started with just Easton La Follette, and it was due to kind of the Truex campus proximity. When we did Easton La Follette alone, we had 65 students that submitted applications. When we think about expanding to all 6 high schools, I firmly believe that we are going to have way over 100 students that are interested, and we have the ability to support them with this partnership of Madison College that I personally wouldn't see why wouldn't we add 100 if we have more than 100 and we're able to support them.
Well, I mean, cost is certainly one consideration, I would say. I guess I feel more strongly maybe than even, certainly as strongly as TJ and Jen feel. I would actually say the demographic of this program has to match our demographic in our schools. And if not, we're not going to, then that number of students is not going to. So if 20% of our students are African American, then 20% of the students in this program need to be African American. If not, so if 40% of our students are white, then 40 students can be white.
So the only thing I would say to that, I appreciate that. The only thing I would say to that is that I want to be careful of that because we are intentionally trying to target populations of students of color, females, low socioeconomic status, and first generation college going. So there is the potential that a percentage of the white population that we currently serve might be less at this program due to meeting one or more of those criteria.
The only thing is, and I am all for making sure that there's opportunities for young women and girls to be in STEM programs, but I wouldn't count that that's meeting a targeted demographic with regards to racial equity. By grouping them all and saying what percentage meet a targeted demographic, I think we're just covering up a whole lot. So I would support this program even with the large cost to our students, but only on the condition that we are meeting the racial demographic that represents our students.
I think this is a great takeaway for us. I mean, I don't think unless others want to chime in.
Gloria wants in.
Yeah, on this
So
particular
does Kate.
topic of the demographics. But I think that's some work we can do before we bring the MOA back and we vote on it.
Right.
I mean, I guess my thing is, I get the demographics matching. I think the criteria, I mean, I just want to be careful, right, to balance that we're not lowering our standards for our African American, Latino students to get into a program. I mean, I think there are ways. It is really about what we value in developing criteria that matches and that will open it up to our diverse student body, right? I mean, I just don't like the idea of, because it's an equity initiative, that we have to assume that we have to lower our standards.
No, and I wasn't suggesting that. I hope that.
No. I'm not saying, I just want to be careful because when we talk about equity, that's oftentimes what comes up is that we have to lower our standards. We have a lot of bright African American and Latino students in our schools, and I think we just have to capture that within the criteria and not assume and use the typical criteria that we would use otherwise, right? I mean, I think I really like focusing on our, students of color and first, generation college students and so forth, because it does capture that, right?
The concern I have is I think I think we could very well not find the number of students that meet the demographic characteristics with regards to race. When you look at interest, you look at, the 17% right there, and then you're down to how much interest there is in this particular type of program. And for that reason, I'm not at all saying lower the standards, because, we have just, unfortunately, by 10th grade, we have lost a lot of students who aren't maybe not going to meet those requirements plus interest in the program. And that's why I think having an eye that says this is what we are setting this, and it's up to us to make sure. Maybe it has to be in 8th grade. Maybe it has to be earlier that you have to start working with students to develop the students who are the lowest in terms of eligibility for this program based on this, to say this is a program, but there's going to be qualifications for this. We want to work with you as to how we can cultivate. If we feel, in fact, we're not going to get that pool, then it's incumbent upon us to do things, I believe, earlier to be able to create that pool.
But I would also like to see the breakdown, like as Mary suggested, of the numbers, right? I mean, when we talk about 2 or more individuals, I mean, are they biracial? I mean, are they? I would want to know black, white, Latino, white. I mean, what is the breakdown there?
The,
that would be
they're-
helpful.
They're
What-
biracial, like what they're,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that would be, I think, significant to know, right? I mean,
Yeah, I can tell you anecdotally, the majority of our students over there that are biracial present as African American.
Mhm.
But I can look up.
Yeah.
Formally.
This is the big issue, though. Yeah.
Kate, go ahead.
I mean, TJ, you kind of mentioned that this is a shiny object, and I actually agree, but I think it's a good one. I think it's a shiny goal that we should embrace and hold out for students that can be achieving at higher levels, and a true pathway to free college is a phenomenal opportunity. So I'm excited about what that opportunity, I guess, or potential could motivate in some of our middle school students, to your point, Mary, in terms of kind of cultivating earlier, right? Like I think it's, it could be a very powerful transformative option for young people and families. So I have a couple kind of contract questions. What if we don't get to 100? Do we have any changes in terms of cost obligation, given that the cost per student, like, are we obligated to cover $1 million or the equivalent thereof, irrespective of?
No, that's a great question. There's language in there that says up to 100 students and then up to 200 students.
And the per student cost does not
Correct.
change no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I just want to back up for that because I just want to highlight one thing that I think is important, that through this strong partnership that we have with Madison College, that when we have gone kind of back and forth and really thinking about the next steps, they reduced the cost of what we're paying right now for our students, which was a $6,900 to a $6,500 cost. So I just think that is something that is important to highlight, and that when we get to next year's cohort, it would be per student in terms of the number of students that we have. We have worked closely, at least in the first cohort, that together we did parent sessions, together we did interviews, together we worked on it, and we were in concert with that. And so we're not obligated above and beyond who we actually accept.
So I guess the flip side of that is it possible for us to pay a lower per student fee at the 200 student level? I mean, it would be kind of typical to have some correlation between the number of students paying tuition and the kind of cost, or so it's a question, I guess, to ask. I appreciate the original kind of reduction, and I appreciate the partnership very significantly. But as we grow, is there a way to reduce the per? It's a very significant investment on our part.
Yes, and I don't have an actual answer for that. All I could say is,
for us to potentially explore in partnership. The second question is around high school attendance areas. Do we have any philosophy about enrollment across attendance areas, given the location aspect of this? I mean, we've kind of started with just East Side schools. We're going to be moving to a South-West Side location. Do we expect even numbers of students across high school attendance areas? Are we going to provide transportation to get there? Like, how do we expect to?
Yeah, so Madison College provides a bus pass for students similarly to what we have in this cohort. So there.
How long does it take to get from the north side to the south?
So I don't know the answer to that. They chose like the south side because they thought that was more centrally, like proximity located. I do not know the answer to how long it would take, but in terms of the question of transportation, it would be provided. We haven't said at this point that it would be a clean like 24, 24, 24, 24, and then because we have Capital and Shabazz in there as well. So we didn't evenly distribute like the number of seats at this point. We wanted to see the applications that we have. I think that around your question in terms of the South Campus versus maybe Truax, I do know that one of the conversations we've been having recently is thinking about potentially split location for certain courses based on what kids are interested in, but we haven't had the conversation of a different location for the students at this point outside of South. I mean, South was built with like part of this being the vision in mind, and so that's the conversation we've had so far.
And then the last question is just, I mean, we're going to have a budget conversation next week. Is this built in, Kelly, to our budget forecast right now for next year and the year following?
The budget that's in here.
Yeah, so it's an incremental $1 million and $2 million.
Okay, so we. Oh.
Just two real quick
I'm sorry.
things.
Go ahead.
From Sandburg Elementary to South Transfer Point at rush hour is about an hour. Number two is just I ran the numbers. It looks like approximately 54 of our current 10th grade African American students would, if 17%, that would be about 54 would qualify at that. And then that would be the initial qualification. And as Mary said, express interest, go through the application and interview process and beyond that. But so it would be 54 right now. So.
Okay. Thanks.
That's great.
Okay.
What I've been doing over here while listening.
Yeah.
Thank you for that information. I
The
think
longest bus ride is about an hour and a half from one, but so it's about an hour for a lot of games. And
Yeah.
That's a long time.
An hour, at the most, sometimes less. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want this. We're going to leave the opportunity open to students who are willing to travel as far as they need to travel. And I think when the Madison South Campus was originally conceived, it was meant to largely serve the community of South Madison. So it won't surprise me if we have more students from the neighborhood are choosing based on proximity to attend. And I think that would be in alignment with the vision for the South Madison campus, which certainly makes me okay with it. Doesn't mean it's closed to anyone else.
Yeah.
But I think our major takeaway is we want to do a little more work on how do we ensure that we're getting the population that we created this program for, right? Getting back to what the original conception was. That's incredibly important, I know, to all of us.
Yeah.
So we'll take one more look at that and make sure we've got it right. And a lot of it is about recruitment, getting great information out to parents, right? I mean, it's about kind of tapping individuals on the shoulder and saying, hey, you would be great for this program. We need you, want to encourage you to apply.
Yeah,
So-
which is how we did it the first time, and we also
Yeah.
put in there this idea of like special circumstance or unique circumstance. So we would never like if there was a kid interested, because last year when we opened it up to all families, and kids applied, and then based on that, there's always an opportunity for that. So I wanted to put that out there that is in there as a statement now already for that.
Have we done any attempts to privately fundraise to support this?
We are working on it. Yes.
It's just, I mean, the other major thing here. This
I agree.
is a major investment on our part.
And I think
And
there'll
it's
be
a
people
special
who want
investment,
to
but
invest. Yeah.
This is
That's one of our goals.
This is an area that I would love to see some private support
Yeah.
for.
Me too.
Okay.
Me too, and we're on it.
We've got, the other thing to note is that the South Transfer Point is right across the street from the school, so that's hopefully might be used to cut some of the travel time if they're busing. You heard that when I taught GED classes, I had a lot of guys that I worked with that quit school, terrible grade point averages. They came in, you talk to them, you give them an assessment, and they ace the thing. Their skills were fine. So whatever screening tool we use, we can't really rely always on the grade point average because, as you said, kids blew off school. And they got all the skills, the skill levels where they're supposed to be, they just didn't get motivated. So if we can incorporate that into how we apply and how we accept some of the applications, and let it known that if this is something that you're like, and if you think you can do it, you got the skill, you just blew off school, I get that. So this might be that shiny thing that pulls a bunch of folks in, say, yeah, I can do that, and they do pull it off. So how you go about doing that is tricky, but we should be open to it. So we just shouldn't just automatically say, no, you can't because your grade point is 4.4 points under what it should be. So we can be flexible on that somehow. So that's what we heard. Let's go fund, seems like an easy fundraising hit. Let's go get some money for it and save us something along the way. Anything else from anybody? Long night for you guys, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And
thank the schools for being here. It was a nice way to talk about that.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
Ahmad, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, adjourned.